Joe, Urban Meyer came out a while back and said that the Ohio State University might be the most talented roster that maybe college football has ever seen. It came back. They were like, oh, he's overreacting. He's being a homer. But then you really look at this team and start asking questions. Just how good can Ohio State be? Is Urban Meyer wrong? Now, I don't necessarily agree with them being one of the best rosters ever. That I think you got to go out there and prove it before those kinds of things can be said. However, Joe, there's just not a lot of holes on this team. The talent level that is on this team is absolutely ridiculous. And I think I got to be honest, if they're not preseason number 2 behind Georgia, I'm sorry. You could put them at preseason number 1 for me. If we're being honest, they might be the top team in the land.
I won't go as far. I'm sorry, Ohio State fans. I'm really high on you guys this year. I won't go as far as to say they're number 1 for the one reason. I think having a returning quarterback on your roster is incredibly important. So Carson Beck being the sitting returning starter, I'm going to lean on them. They're always going to be my number 1 team unless they show some signs of them taking steps backward, which I don't think is going to happen unless Kirby Smart just disappears and goes into hiding or whatever he decides to do. But to talk about Ohio State, the only take to really have is one, what you just said. They're a top 2 team. Anyone who puts them anywhere else is trying way too hard. But most importantly, we commended Michigan last year, the entire media, for the way that they brought everybody back, that they committed in NIL. They brought back all of their top playmakers, Blake Corum, important offensive linemen like Zach Zinter, good, important defensive line pieces came back, their linebacking core, Junior Colson, all of these experienced, dominant athletes at Michigan came back. And this is your rival in Ohio State, and you realized instead of trying to go in other directions, why not try to replicate what Michigan just did? Michigan, as we did their preview, it's going to take them some time to get back to where they need to be, as they had a massive, massive roster turnover. But Ohio State barely lost anybody, especially to the draft. Albeit that they lost Marvin Harrison Jr., their receiving room feels deeper. It feels more balanced as young guys are going to be stepping up. I'm curious to see what Carnell Tate does. Jeremiah Smith could be really exciting and fun to watch. Their running back duo is the best in the country without debate between Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. And I really think that their offensive line with John Fryer, I think, is an underrated right tackle that they have. And I'm a big fan of Donovan Jackson as one of my top interior offensive linemen in the country and also for the 2025 NFL Draft. This group of players that they have front to back is one of the deepest in the country, if not the deepest in the country. And they have so much premier talent at the top that there shouldn't be any debate. I know we're going to get to in a second, Blake, talking about what is going to happen when these two teams face with Oregon and Ohio State. But right now, I feel pretty confident that Ohio State is the second best team in the country.
Basically, this all comes down to Will Howard, and I'm not going to I don't want to get back in the debate with you. We've had so many conversations about him. I personally think he's going to be more than serviceable. I think he's good enough to be the quarterback to lead them to a national title. That's me, okay? Because I don't believe that you need a game changer there when you win. Joe, when you have, literally,
to win a title, you need a returning quarterback. I'm sorry, you need a returning quarterback.
I'm not saying that you don't. I'm not saying that you don't. Okay. However, all I'm saying is it's not like Will Howard doesn't have 792 passing attempts on his career.
Okay, but wait. This has been my whole point with Will Howard is he's fine. I don't think he takes you heads above better what they had last year.
I don't agree with the just overall notion that you have to be spectacular at the position when you have that much talent around you.
You don't have to be spectacular at the position, but having a returning starter is important.
Not where I'm trying to I get that. Not where I'm trying to go.
Okay.
But all I am saying is that's the question mark that everybody has. And by the way, if Will Howard is your biggest question mark, I got a news flash for you. He's not a bad quarterback. Like, at all. So when I hear people talk about him, I just say, okay, you're talking about him as if the kid just sucks. No, that's not even remotely true. That's how it comes off when everybody says you need a returning quarterback to win it all. Okay, that's fine. That is what history has shown us the last couple of years. Actually, that's not true because Stetson Bennett did it. Now, I understand that Stetson Bennett was a first-time starter when he won Georgia's first national championship.
But he had already been on the roster. There are.
I get what you're saying, but that is
CBS Sports did an article though in like the last 10 years. I think almost every single year there were a couple exceptions where returning head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and quarterback.
So again, we talked about Miami. Me talking about cohesion being a big deal. I do agree that cohesion could be interesting here. How does things play out with Chip Kelly and Ryan Day? Are they on the same? There's so many things that they have to figure out. I agree with you. But, Joe, when I look at their schedule, they have Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, and at Michigan State. They have 4 games, pretty much an old NFL preseason to figure it out. And they will figure it out. Their schedule in the front part of this is so light, Joe, they could figure things out during games and run shit to see what works because the first 3 teams that they play are dog water. Okay, like let's just get that out of the way. So I understand that you're talking about cohesion. They don't play anybody in the top that could threaten them. Nobody. I look at what they brought in Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, and Caleb Downs. I think they brought in the Kyrmack kid from Ohio, the tight end, who might be serviceable, could be serviceable, and then everything that they have returning. So I just don't know offensively if there are holes. Like, I don't. Will Howard, okay, whatever, but
okay, wait. I need to cut you off. We got to stop doing this. Like, you're framing me up. Seriously, like you're framing me up like I'm saying that Will Howard sucks. I've never said on here that Will Howard sucks. All I have pointed out is that there is not much of a gap between him and Kyle McCord. This is not an improvement that takes them over the top. This is one that keeps them trending in a forward direction. And this is all I've been trying to say. He's not a game changer. He is a good quarterback who has started football games. So we got to stop acting like I said the kid sucks. Those words never came out of my mouth, Blake. You just said that I thought he was a hole. I don't think that he's a roster hole.
I didn't say you. I said
you just did.
No, I didn't. Go back.
You just said they might not have holes, and then you said, "Well, you brought up Will Howard."
I'm basically was coming in here conceding. If you think that he could be an issue, I'm fine with that. But Joe, everywhere else offensively, I don't think that they have holes. Now, their interior of their offensive line did scare me in that spring game, especially at left guard.
Isn't Donovan Jackson their left guard?
Or right guard, whichever one it was. Whichever the interior pressure that we came in here during the spring game said, oh, shit, they were giving up too much pressure.
Look, I'm not worried about look, this all comes down to what I think with this team. I'm really not worried about – we're doing the same thing that we did yesterday that you and I started yelling about with Alabama. Is it a guy – got pushed around a couple reps because he was going up against Tyleik Williams in a ridiculous defensive line, or was it because the kid actually isn't good? Well, I think that plays more to how talented and gifted their defensive line is, and why I'm really confident in Ohio State, though, to move this conversation along. Defensively, they're going to be able to lean on that side of the football. If there is any slow steps towards figuring out who are the playmakers outside of Emeka Egbuka, which they don't even need time to figure that out. We know who the big names are. But if, say, they have a slow game offensively, they're going to be like Michigan's team last year, where their defensive line, their linebackers, their safeties, their corners. Every single one of those guys at all those position groups are top 10, top 15 in the country at their given position groups. That's why I have so much confidence in this Ohio State team.
All right. We got some super chats flying in here. We'll get to them in just at the end of the segment. Yeah. All right. Let me stay with me here until the end. If we're going to move to defense, what is Ohio State's goal this year?
To win a national title.
All right, to win a national title.
And to beat Michigan.
And to beat Michigan, which I think they're going to do. Joe, I think we talked about yesterday, stats could be deceiving. Last year, Ohio State's run defense was 27th in the country. Very good, right? Like when you look at them, that is very good. Joe, against the above average offensive lines that they faced last year, which were 2, I would say 3 with Missouri. They gave up well over 150 yards to Michigan and well over 170 yards against Notre Dame. Now, I understand Notre Dame didn't score, so what are you talking about? They only scored.
They also couldn't throw the ball. They had to run the ball.
Right, only 14 points. What are you discussing? When you do face, if there is a hole, and it's not a massive hole, it's like a very small little leak. I wonder if your goal is to win a national championship, if you have to face offensive lines like Georgia, if you have to face an offensive line like LSU, God forbid, I do ask the questions about, hey, the 2 biggest high-profile games that you had last year, the worst defensive area that you had, statistically, was getting pushed around in the run game. I mean, Joe, the question that I start asking, are they good, like really good at rushing the passer? Yes. But the biggest high-profile games that you've had the last 2 years, the offensive lines for the opposing team pushed you around, and that's ultimately what got you beat. So I don't know how I'm trying to frame this. Do I think that their defensive line's really good? Yeah, I think they're really good. However, is there something to be said if that, like every time that you lose, that is the biggest weakness on your defense? Because Joe, last year they were the #1 secondary in the country. We can debate it, but every statistical metric they were at #1. So I say if there is something that I'm like, hey, if they face Georgia, now what?
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about that. I'm just
fair.
I keep comparing them to Michigan. And 2 years ago, what happened to Michigan in the college football playoff? Their defense, that was their strength, got cooked. They got run all over. They gave up a ton of splash plays. Following season, all those important players come back. They're older. They're more experienced. They have the depth. Most of those guys don't leave. There's something to be said, I think, about progression, especially when they have the quality of talent on the roster that I know is going to improve and get better. And when we watch the tape, we watch JT Tuimolau and Jack Sawyer. They're not super productive pass rushers, but they are punch you in the mouth, go to war type of guys against the run.
The issue with them about team sacks, I'm looking at it right now, is everybody has at least 3 or more, okay? But the highest guy is 6.5. So everybody,
they don't have a premier guy. But just like Michigan.
Well, exactly. Thank you. And I was going to compare that. Last year, Michigan didn't have a double-digit guy, right? Like they had 5 dudes with 5.5 sacks or more. That was the thing that propelled them. Yeah. So I'm looking down here: 6.5, 5, 3, 3.5, 5, 5.5. No, I don't think getting after the quarterback was necessarily your issue. That's not what I'm saying. But again, we're having to compare them to what we need to compare them to against Georgia and all these other teams. Now, I look at their schedule in just as a whole. Joe, the first month of their schedule is the biggest cakewalk ever. Like
Michigan last year. There's so many parallels.
Side note, remember this when we talk about should the SEC go to 9 conference games? Remember we did that literally a month ago on this show? All I am saying is don't talk shit about the SEC when this.
No one has talked shit about the SEC schedule. I never talked shit about it.
Have you ever seen a Joel Klatt segment in your life?
I don't listen to Joel Klatt, so I don't.
Okay, if you look at Fox and at Joel Klatt specifically, he has at least once a month why the SEC.
All right. I'm not letting you hijack this segment with that. Okay.
Regardless, Joe, I don't see anybody besides having to go to Oregon, okay, which we'll talk about here probably at length. Joe, nobody on the schedule scares me outside of that for them.
They have an incredibly favorable schedule, too, that I think sets them up. And I'm just going to come right out here and say it. I think they go 12-0. I think they run the table. I think that they win the Big Ten. What this does end up coming down to is when do you want to lose to Oregon? Because you're going to probably have to play Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. And I stand by one of the biggest...
Hard to beat a team twice.
The biggest cliche in all of
Oregon
football.
Just happened to Oregon last year.
Well, Oregon managed to lose twice to Washington. So there's possibility that when we get to the Oregon segment, we talk about this, that they could lose twice to Ohio State because Dan Lanning hasn't gotten it out of his system of winning in big games. But to get back to here with Ohio State, I think that they are so balanced that despite them having to go on the road, and this is what I was really grappling with in the pre-show. Like, I was really fighting with myself on, man, who the hell do I pick? Because you go to Oregon, but Ohio State's the slightly better team. So who wins in this matchup? I'm going with Ohio State right now. Maybe that changes mid-season, but I feel like Ohio State wins that matchup and they run the table and they go 12-0.
All right. I'm going to save that for Oregon segment about that matchup. This is what I would say. I just don't know if Oregon has enough. Like, I legitimately don't. I think that there's a big concern with them that people don't. I think they have a lot of talent, but we'll get to that in a minute. Joe, I think they run the table too. I think they go undefeated, and they are my Big Ten champions. I'm going to tell you this. Until Dan Lanning proves that he can win the big one for me, I do this for everybody. Everybody wants to do it for the coach that I cover every day. Mm-hmm. So let's do it for Dan. You just came off a very successful season. Very successful. 12-2 is nothing to sneeze at. But you got a lot of turnover and the things that you got to get corrected. I think at the end of this, it's going to be Ohio State and Georgia. Those are my two teams. And I think that they run the table. And I'm going to be honest. I don't know if that Michigan game doesn't get ugly.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be a blowout because they've been lopsided lately, but they haven't been. We rarely get blowouts. These teams are too evenly matched for that Michigan-Ohio State game to become a blowout.
I agree. But
I really think it looks like last year's game.
Could be. And that game was 30-24. I mean, Joe, we're literally a Kyle McCord getting hit in the backfield sack where he throws it up for grabs away. They were marching down the field, right? Like, I mean, like they were marching down the field to beat Ohio State. They would have beaten them. But Johnson makes a great play. Pretty sure it was Will Johnson that makes a great play.
Yep.
And we're off to the races. Defensively, look, Denzel Burke, we didn't even talk about Caleb Downs here. Okay. Yeah. Just very quickly, what I'd say on him, he's the best DB, in my opinion, in the country. Joe, you're adding 107. Joe, hot take. I think they're going to be the best secondary in the country again.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.